Welcome to the Chicago Golf Report podcast.
Well, I think I've heard this from a lot of different people who are, I think, broadcasters, sportscasters, that their goal was to be a professional athlete when they were growing up. And you get to a certain point after playing some high school sports that you don't have the skills, size, strength, the whole thing to get to the next level of playing college, or, that dream of playing professional someday goes out the window. But you love sports so much that you say, wow, what else can I do? I want to keep my hand in it and stay in sports some way. And why not in the business world? Why not after I graduate from college? So I did an internship at Channel 5 Sports in 1981 when I was a junior at DePaul University for Rich Brenner and Chet Coppock, who were the two main sports anchors. And that was amazing. I spent 6 months with them, literally 6 days a week inside the Channel 5 sports offices, and kind of learned that, this would be a great business to get into. And it takes mentors like that to get you to the next level. So I was on my way. There's a longer story with that of how I followed Rich Brenner to North Carolina, and he helped me get my first job in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I was on my way, but that kind of started it all, Walter.
So one of the things that I've always admired and enjoyed watching you and listening to you is you have this real sort of a calmness and a comfort. And I know there's sometimes I'll watch people, professionals, and you're almost on every edge of every word, like, please do well, because you can tell they feel the stress. But that's always been the opposite for you. You've always had this really warm, but just kind of smooth delivery, and you're very calm. What do you attribute that to?
Well, that's a good question. Although I like to tell others that are getting in the business, if you're nervous, the people watching you are going to be nervous, right? Mm-hmm. So I've seen some sportscasters here, local broadcasters, that are on edge, and you're hoping that they don't make a mistake. And I think it's about being prepared and being confident, and just trying to communicate and be comfortable. That's the whole thing. If you're comfortable, I think those watching you are going to be comfortable. And so I appreciate that compliment, because I've tried to pride myself on that, and just make it conversational so that people can hopefully enjoy the message that you're sending.
So you've been around 30 years now with the Golf Scene Show. You've had all these other experiences throughout your career, and you're still evolving. You were able to be a part of this great market, Chicagoland market, which is such a great opportunity, not only for golf, but for all sports. And you were there when sportscasters during the 70s were kind of the pinnacle, right? They were getting paid the most. You think about Tim Weigel, you think about Mark Giangreco, Jim Rose. These guys were the real, I guess they would attract people before even weathercasters became the highest paid people. And now we've kind of shifted away from that. What was it like to be involved in sports at that point? And you talked about working for Chet Coppock, who was a titan. It was really, compared to what we have now, it's sort of the power was centralized with those folks. What was that like?
Well, and it was, you mentioned 70s, it was really 70s, 80s, and 90s. I mean, when I was at Sports Channel, I came back to Chicago in 1991, and those guys were already $1 million guys. I think at one time I heard that the Channel 7 4 anchors, the two news anchors, weather and sports, were the highest paid people above even New York and Los Angeles. Even though we're a number 3 market, they were all $1 million employees, 4 of them making $1 million at least. So, but you know what? Back then, Walter, it was very competitive. I mean, there was no internet, and especially in the 80s and 90s, we started seeing it maybe a little bit towards the end. But these guys broke stories. When Mike Ditka was hired, I was at Channel 5, and Chet Coppock had a great in with the Hallis family. And he was trying to break it over, Ditka's teammate, Johnny Morris, and, Weigel wanted a piece of that. So these guys were after each other. to break stories. And so you turn on the Channel 5, Channel 2, Channel 7 news, and you were getting actual news. Now it's, you've already heard it, you've already read it. They're not breaking any news or any stories. The best they could do is maybe present a feature that you haven't heard about. But if you open up your smartphone, you can learn anything you want on ESPN or Twitter, Instagram, you name all the various sports websites. So it has changed a lot. And so I'm surprised almost that they still have sports on local news. I guess there's a need for it. And maybe with some of the talk shows and these bear shows, there's still have an avenue for it, and they're still raising advertising dollars. But to get 3 minutes at 5, 6, and 10 anymore, what can they show? Everyone's already seen the highlights, everyone's already seen the stories. The players' sound bites aren't that interesting anymore, unless there's some fresh tape from one of the practices or something, or hey, the story of Zach LaVine, may he want to be traded, and then you want to hear from Zach, although most people have that out already before the news comes on.
So we've talked a little bit about, you brought up Chet Coppock. So I think it'd be great just to kind of get maybe a story or two about Chet. I think a lot of people now younger people may not be aware of the impact he made. And I remember at that time, it was almost, I'm sure he played a big part in inventing sports radio. What was it like to work with him?
Yeah, he was amazing. I mean, he was a titan. I mean, it was just, he was big. He was 6'6", and this bold personality. But he was so nice to the people that he worked with. I mean, we had, Aldo Perry and Jeff Davis, two of the best sports producers in the market, and he was just so kind to me as an intern. Didn't know me from anything, and I was his gopher, so to speak, but always treated me so well. And he knew I wanted to learn the business, and it was show up on time, be there. And if he asked you to be there 6 days a week, you were there 6 days a week. The job wasn't hard, but it was interesting. But so Chet was such a good-hearted person, really. And but I tell you, I admired his work. I told him one time, I remember when I was interning for him, Walter, he was the #1 sportscaster at NBC5 in Chicago, but on the side, he would run out of his sports office and do sports updates for WMAQ radio 670 during the day. He'd get in there at 2:30 and he'd be preparing his 5, 6, and 10 o'clock scripts, but he would run across the hall, so to speak, to WMAQ, which was on the same floor as Channel 5, and he won Radio Broadcaster of the Year, and he was doing it as a side gig, but that's how good he was. And what's amazing was, while every other person in the market, I believe, and really forever, wrote out stuff on the teleprompter word for word, and they still do, Chet didn't like the teleprompter. His scripts were, Bears, Lions, and blank page, and he would just talk, and they would get on to the next subject. He needed a roll cue if there was videotape to go to. But he never wrote it out word for word. And that is an incredible talent and art. And the same thing with his radio. I mean, people would do a radio show. If you listen to anybody doing radio, chances are they're going to have a full script. Bears last night lost, blah, 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 and this and this and this. And Chet would have a couple of notes, but he would just totally ad lib it. He never liked to do it word for word on a script. So I don't know if anyone's ever had that talent before, and to be so good at it and award-winning at ad-libbing is amazing to me.
So after working as an intern for Chet, then you go on to North Carolina. You have various jobs in there. You get into TV, and then you come back here, Sports Channel. What's it been like then? You had that experience working in another market. You come back home. You work in this market, and I know from the viewer's perspective, whether it's the athletes themselves, whether it's a Derrick Rose or Dick Butkus, we always kind of have a little bit more affinity for a local guy, a local person. And then even for yourself. I mean, I know I always felt that with Jason Benetti. He's, a guy from Homewood Flossmoor. You just kind of you root for him a little bit more. What's that like from your perspective to come home and to have that experience to work in your own market?
Yeah, that was the dream. I mean, I think as a young sportscaster, they say get all your mistakes done. And I was in Wilmington, North Carolina for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, and then Greensboro, where I was actually Rich Brenner's weekend anchor, who I interned for at Channel 5 when I was in college, to talk about going full circle and kind of a dream come true there. But yeah, the dream was, Walter, to come home and do this for a living in Chicago, where you grew up. I grew up in Park Ridge, Maine South High School. I think when I was a young boy, I was told I kind of remember this. I set up a little table in my basement and pretend I was a sportscaster. Maybe many of us did who are in this business. And that was the dream, because I used to watch Brett Musburger when he was on Channel 2, and then Johnny Morris, and of course, Tim Weigel and the rest. And even when I was in North Carolina, my dad used to send me tapes. He would send me VHS tapes of the local sportscasters and what they were doing on 2, 5, 7, and 9, just so I could keep up with the style, keep up with how they were doing shows, and maybe relate some of that to what I was doing in North Carolina. But yeah, to answer your question, the dream was to get back here in Chicago and stay in Chicago as long as I could, covering the teams that I grew up with, right? I mean, I was actually a bigger Blackhawks fan than I was a Bulls fan in the 60s and 70s. And then when Jordan came along, obviously you're a huge Bulls fan. Even though I played basketball, didn't play hockey, but I was a huge Blackhawks fan. But of course, Bears, Bulls, Cubs, White Sox, loved them all. And to cover them then in your profession after you've trained in another market was a dream come true. And so fortunate that Sports Channel opened that up in 1991 to doing these pregame shows, halftime shows, postgame shows. We had the Blackhawks, Bulls, White Sox at that time. And it was just tremendous. I got in at a good time, especially with Jordan. After I missed the first championship, but being part of the next 5, just amazing.
So one of the things I respect about your career is that you've been able to evolve, right? You haven't just done one thing for 40, 50 years or whatever. You've changed, right? You've gone different markets, different medium. Let's talk a little bit about the golf scene. So 30 years you've been doing this show that you created just out of nowhere. And they're really proud. I don't think at the time there was anything like it. So what was the impetus for the golf scene, and how has it evolved over these 30 years?
Well, good question. So I was in Sports Channel. September of 1991 is when I started. And I think it had to be 1993, because it's been 30 years that we started the golf scene. There was a producer there, Dave Lockhart, who was one of our Sports Channel report producers. And I knew Dave loved golf. We kind of golfed together on some off days. And we put it together and said, you know what? There's nothing like this in the market. Like you mentioned, Walter, no one's doing a local golf show. Why don't we think about selling Sports Channel on, hey, can we do a half-hour magazines type style format and a golf show that shows people where to play? So we started the show with 4 people. Myself as the host, Dave Lockhart as the main producer, a gentleman named Chris Delera, who was one of Dave Lockhart's good friends. Chris is one of the best videographers in the city of Chicago. Forever did Bulls, Blackhawks, White Sox, Cubs games, the actual game camera work, and owned his own camera. So Chris, and he loved golf. So Chris knew golf very well. So he was our photographer. Then a guy named Mike Monroe, who actually owned the White Pines Golf Dome. We became buddies with Mike just through the golf world. And Mike said, guys, I love this idea. I'm going to be your sales guy. So Mike Monroe was our first sales guy. So we had a sales guy, a producer, a videographer, and a host. And the 4 of us, we hardly made any money, but we sold the notion to Sports Channel, and they loved it. And we've been doing it for 30 years. The names have changed. Mike got out of it. Chris went his own way. Dave moved to Florida, and then he started a couple other shows himself. But I've remained with it because we partnered with another group at Cost Broadcast Sales. And Tom Miller has been forever, the last 20 years at least, my partner now with the golf scene. We own the show together, and he sells it, and I produce it and host it. So it's been a lot of fun.
So with that show, it kind of provides you entry into all these different clubs and facilities and companies, and you get to meet pretty much everybody who's making news in the Chicagoland area for all this time. What is it about the show that you've enjoyed doing over these years?
You know what? I think the response I get on the streets, people thank me constantly to this day, Walter, saying, you know what, thank you for showing me where to play. You know, because we don't do a lot of private courses. Every now and then we do, like when Medina had a big $28 million renovation, they hired us to come out and show people that, you know, they're not a stuffy club, that they're a family-oriented club, and let's show some things besides the 3 golf courses that we do here. But I think that's the response I'd like to hear the best is, Steve, thanks for telling me where to play. Thanks for showing me Ravislow in the south suburbs, and, you know, Bolingbrook, that I thought was an all private club, and it's really all public, you know, and places like that, what Cantini is doing, and what this club and that club. There's been so many of them. And then in the winter, we do the winter show, our winter episode, showing people where they can play and practice, take lessons, and play in domes and indoors. And we've been doing that show now for 10, almost 15 years, you know, showing people that golf season doesn't have to end here. We've got a lot of opportunity to continue on, and more than ever now with these indoor simulator golf places. So that's been the labor of love to, you know, and then there's been the equipment, you know, show me what new equipment is there. You know, I like to do a new equipment segment. Hey, look out for this. It's not in the market yet. It's not for sale yet, but here's something new from, you know, Cleveland Srixon or Wilson or Ping or PXG or TaylorMade, Callaway, whatever, and some apparel too. So what's in the golf world? And then my interviews, you know, I've always loved to do the interviews, and we can get into that. A lot easier when it was Jack Nicklaus, Gary Player, and Arnold Palmer, my 3 favorite ever to interview. You don't get interviews like you do. You know, you can do some of the Nick Hardys now and some of the people that come to town, but trying to get Tiger and some of those people, almost impossible, you know, to get alone right now, especially with the media world and how it's changed. But back in the day, it was great to bring on a 5-minute interview with the king, you know, Arnold Palmer. And whenever Jack came to town, he would give us his time, and Gary Player as well, and forever indebted to them, and nicest guys and best interviews I've ever done, I think, were with those guys who gave their time, gave thought-provoking answers, and would do anything for you.
You talked about the changing landscape of media. We've already talked about 70s, 80s, and 90s was kind of that time of the local sportscaster, these big, huge personalities and such. One thing that's changed, say, over the past few years, when I guess you'd say that the kingmakers of golf used to be the guys who would sit in the analyst chair on the main broadcast. So a Ken Venturi, and then a Nick Faldo, a Johnny Miller. Even that's changed now recently. And so if you're looking for power, you almost have to go to these golf influencers, right? Paige Spiranek, 6 million subscribers across channels. She's the person that the Chicago Golf Show, brings in last year, and they have their best year ever. The power that these folks have, Good Golf or the Bryan brothers or any of these people, their reach is enormous, even more so than any of these broadcasters. What's your take of the fact that now golf influencers have become the power brokers of the golf business?
Yeah, it's interesting, and they're riding it hard, aren't they? I mean, you know, Paige is on that verge of, you know, being a little risque, and people, you know, want to click for the pictures and everything. But she says, hey, you know what? I'm getting paid, and I'm not doing anything illegal, and I'm trying to keep it as clean as I can. And then there's others that are like her, the new Paige Sporanics, you know, this is the next person in line. And some of these young females are trying to get in line and say, wow, if Paige is doing it, I'm going to do the same. But you know what? They're gaining a reaction. I mean, I think it's great. You know, it's good. If it's good for golf, it's good, right? As long as it's clean and within the rules, so to speak. You know what? If it's good for golf, and these companies are profiting from them, and they're getting the word out, and you're adding golfers, I think that's good, Walter. I really do. You know, and that's where it's gone because of the internet. You know, the golf influencers, and you know, you're not going to see the old time guys. You know, the Vern Lundquist and these people. You know, Jim Nance. Trying to take that angle at all. They are what they are, and they're legendary and terrific in what they've done and what they're still doing. But hey, I think the bottom line is if it's good for golf, that's a good thing.
So before we segue into our last couple questions, I've got two people that I would love to get an anecdote about, just because they were central in my life, but central in anybody who's lived in the Chicagoland area. First one, Norm Van Leer. What's your take on Norm? You spent so much time with him. What was that like?
Oh my goodness. A guy that, talk about a dream come true again. One of my idols growing up, out on the playground, you saw Van Leer and Jerry Sloan, and then to work with Norm, first time I met him, this is a guy I couldn't get his autograph, couldn't get a picture with, growing up, couldn't get near him. And then all of a sudden you're in the chair with him, doing the Bulls games, for 6-7 years. And we became best of friends. He was in my wedding. He was a groomsman in my wedding. And I miss Norm to this day. I still talk with his wife, Susan, and his two daughters, Heidi and Hillary. So they are like family. But to work with Norm, and he treated everyone so well, Walter. I mean, everybody at Sports Channel loved Norm. I don't care what role you had, a producer, an intern. He had nicknames for everybody, and he was just, it wasn't a guy that just came in and did the show and left. He wanted to go out afterwards with you, and he said, bring whoever you can and let's go, have a drink or something to eat. And but he was so kind to everybody, such a good-hearted guy, and it goes a long way. It really does. But to work with Norm, and we just had a great mix. I leaned on him. It was so comfortable in the chair because I knew I was going to get thought-provoking answers, and he had a gut reaction to everything. And he told the truth, and people, I think, respected that. So I thought it was just great the way he had it in this town. And I'll forever miss him, but I really respect the way that he took care of people. And I think that's the most important. He was a great broadcaster, a great player, 4-time NBA All-Star. Those are nice things in the record book, but the way he treated people and the way people loved working with him is what I'm going to always remember. The way he treated my family, and treated me like a brother or a son, will go forever.
So the second person is kind of, I guess, tied to Chet Coppock. And I'm not sure that you had much contact with him, but I know that when you were working, I think it was at WMVP, you kind of brushed paths with Steve Dahl. What was it like with Steve Dahl? Because, again, that was another guy for so long, and he's still going with his podcast. I always thought, like, if there was beyond my friends and family, I probably spent more time with Steve Dahl in the car, listening to him and his creativity. What was it like to be around that? Because he was certainly a power broker for a long time in Chicago.
Yes, he was. I agree with you. I spent so much time listening to Steve and Gary, and he really made his mark during the blowing up the records. The Disco Demolition. I remember that. I remember that night exactly. I was actually working at the Marriott, Chicago Marriott, as a limo driver, and Don Kessinger, who was the manager, was staying at our hotel at the time. So I remember he came back after game one of the doubleheader. We were like, what happened there? If my memory serves, but no, Steve Dahl, I tell you what I really loved was that even in the last 5 years, when Steve had his last show at WLS 890 AM, we did the Bulls games and the White Sox games out of WLS. So I would replace Steve in his chair in the studio every time I came up to do a Bulls game. And he was doing his 3-man show. And it was just great because he would always allow some time to talk. He knew that I had to get in the chair, and I had 2 minutes before, that commercial break before I would have to bring on the Bulls game, and he was leaving. But he wasn't just like he rushed out. Hey, Steve, how are you? Hey, Steve, what's going on? And he always had time for chit chat, small talk, and maybe talk a little bit about the Bulls, but just a really nice guy. And those are little dreams come true too, because you're in the car listening to him when you were, in your teens, and all of a sudden you're kind of working, not with him specifically on the air. He'd bring you on every now and then. But I respect the impact he made for a lot of people in this market. And again, good-hearted guy. I mean, really, he'd tell you some things, a little bit, inside and how he feels and what's going on and everything. So to share some of those moments, I think were priceless, for me, especially because we're very fortunate, you get to run into these people that you grew up listening to. So they make an impact.
I'd like to finish up with a quiz for you. I'm going to name 5 people, and I'd like you to tell me what's the connection between these 5 folks. So
Okay.
Charles Bartlett, Herb Graffis, Phil Cozen, Bob Verdi, and Len Zine.
First couple I'm not familiar with, other than all make an impact. I mean, especially Lenny Zine and Bob Verdi. Golf writers, right? Big impact of golf in the Chicago area. I mean, just some of the best. And Lenny's still doing it. You'll still read some of his stuff. And Bob Verdi and his history and the way he was respected by the PGA Tour players. You know him as a great Tribune columnist for all those years and writing books. And but he loved golf, and he would be at all the golf events. And to get to know Bob a little bit was, again, one of those little dream come true, because you read him growing up, and again, how nice he was to everybody, and took you under, got to know your name. I mean, those things are so important, but Lenny's been a good friend forever. So I respect all those guys who have made an impact on golf in this area. I was talking with someone in the golf media. There's so few of us now, so few of us. We used to have, Reed Hanley and Teddy Greenstein and all these guys, my goodness, who Ed Sherman did it full time, and all these golf writers and reporters, and Brad Palmer, guys who love golf and report golf. You go to the old Western Open, and the media room was full with 50 of us, and now you go to an event and there's 5 of us. BMW Championship last year, I was like, where's all the Chicago media? Besides a couple of the local guys from the local sports stations, 257, 932. There's very few of us left. So I miss that. I really do, because Chicago is a great golf market, and we deserve to have more golf media, I think, on the everyday mainstream.
So just to put a bow on it, Charles Bartlett, he was a golf editor at the Tribune for 36 years.
Okay.
And Herb Graffis, he was with the Sun-Times for 30 years. And then he founded Golfdom magazine back in the day, and then the National Golf Foundation. But the one thing that all those guys share is they are in the Illinois Golf Hall of Fame.
Okay.
And as I was thinking about your career, I think that at some point it's a must that you are in the Illinois Golf Hall of Fame. And it goes back to what you talked about in the past, is you've done for over 30 years, you've taught Chicagoland area where to play, what to play, how to play. And you've brought this to the masses for a long time, which is, as we know, within any Hall of Fame, it's your longevity. So the good news is that you definitely qualify. The bad news is I don't have a vote. So I think all I can do is put that out there. And
I appreciate that.
Happen soon, because you definitely deserve it. And I think the impact you've made for all the people who've watched is definitely there, and something to be extremely proud of.
Oh, thank you, Walter. I appreciate that. It would be a great honor. I'm a member of the 16 Softball Hall of Fame here in Chicago with Mike North. We did the games for so many years, and I still MC their banquet every year, and tight with that group. And that's a great honor, being in there with Tim Weigel and you name it. Boy, I'm thinking of the other media people that are in there. Bob Surratt, and it's a great honor. But to be in golf would be really special, because the true love of what we've done, and it's been that labor of love, and to do it for 30 years, and we don't feel like we're going to stop anytime soon. So to be mentioned with any Hall of Famer in those words, a great honor, and I appreciate the thought. I really do.